Do you ever wonder what people did before the internet? No TikTok, no Instagram, no endless scrolling, and yet life felt fuller. Let me take you back to a time when connection was real. Back then, evenings weren't about screens. They were about voices, laughter, and neighbors gathering around a table. And I can still hear the sound of dominoes slamming against the wood. Do you ever stop and wonder, what did people actually do when there was no internet? No TikTok, no Instagram, no endless scroll, just silence. A silence that, strangely, didn't feel empty at all. I want to take you back, not decades, not centuries, just far enough to a time when the blue glow of a phone screen wasn't the center of our lives. Imagine this: the sun setting, the day's work done, and an entire neighborhood coming alive in a way that today feels almost unreal. We didn't run to our rooms to scroll. We didn't sit apart, headphones in, lost in our own digital bubbles. No, we gathered. We created our own world with the simplest things: a pack of cards, a box of dominoes, the laughter of neighbors carried through open windows. Picture it: an old wooden table in the middle of a yard. Someone brings out a worn deck of cards, edges curled and soft from years of shuffling. Another sets down the domino box with a heavy thud. The smell of evening air, a mix of grass, dust, and sometimes even fresh bread from a neighbor's oven, lingers around us. And then it begins. The games were never just games. They were stories in themselves. Uncles slamming domino pieces with such force you'd think the table would split. Old friends bluffing so obviously in cards that even the children could see through it. And when someone lost, oh, the drama. Teasing, laughter, playful arguments, but all of it wrapped in warmth. And the best part? You didn't need Wi-Fi to feel connected. That connection was already there, alive in the voices around you. I remember evenings when neighbors would just show up, without calling, without texting. They'd knock lightly, poke their head in. You free tonight? Domino. That was it. Plans were made. No typing, bubble, no left on read. Just a simple invitation that turned into hours of togetherness. Sometimes the games stretched late into the night. The sound of dominoes clicking became a kind of background music, like rain on a window. People shared stories between moves, about work, about life, about things they would never post online, because back then there was no online. There was just here. And when you weren't playing, you were watching. Kids would sit at the edge of the table, wide-eyed, memorizing every move, dreaming of the day they'd be old enough to join. The old ones always said, "Watch carefully, because this isn't just domino. This is strategy, this is patience, this is life." And you believe them. But here's the thing: it wasn't only about the games. It was about the ritual, about seeing the same faces every evening, knowing that no matter how hard the day had been, you weren't alone once the sun went down. Neighbors weren't just neighbors. They were like a second family. They laughed with you, argued with you, sometimes even scolded you. But in the end, they were always there. Do you feel that? That strange mix of warmth and longing? That's nostalgia. Because if you've ever experienced even a slice of this, a night spent not online, but together, face to face, you know how deep it cuts when you realize how different things are now. Sometimes I close my eyes and hear it again. The slam of a domino, the burst of laughter, someone pouring tea into mismatched cups, a neighbor's radio playing softly in the background. No notifications, no distractions, just people present in the moment. And maybe that's the real secret. Life without the internet wasn't about killing time. It was about living it. So let me ask you, when was the last time you sat down with people you care about? No phones, no screens, just presence? If you can't remember, maybe it's time to bring back a little bit of what we lost. Because those evenings, those games, those neighborly gatherings, they weren't just entertainment. They were the heartbeat of community. And I promise you this: the sound of dominoes slamming on wood, the thrill of pulling the right card at the right time, the feeling of belonging, it's stronger, deeper, and far more real than any like or share you'll ever get. That was life before the internet. And maybe, just maybe, it was better than we realized. Have you ever seen a group of kids sitting in the same room, yet none of them are really there? Heads bent, faces lit by the pale glow of their phones, fingers swiping endlessly. Silent. Isolated. It makes me wonder, do they even know what they're missing? Because when I was a kid, childhood looked nothing like this. Childhood was raw, wild, alive. We didn't need apps to connect. The streets were our chat rooms, the fields our playgrounds, the night sky our screen. I still remember the way evenings felt. You'd finish your homework, shove your books aside, and the first thing you heard was a voice from outside. Hey, come out. That was the notification. No ringtone, no buzz. Just a friend calling your name until you finally rushed out the door. And once you stepped outside, that was it. Adventure began. The street was alive with kids. We played hide and seek until our knees were scraped and our clothes were covered in dust. There was always one kid who was impossible to catch, slipping into shadows like a ghost, while the rest of us giggled and tried not to breathe too loud. The thrill of hiding in absolute silence, heart pounding your chest as the seeker's footsteps drew closer. No video game has ever recreated that kind of adrenaline. When hide-and-seek got old, we invented new games on the spot. We built rules, changed them, argued, and then laughed until our stomachs hurt. A stick became a sword, a rock became a treasure, a chalk-drawn square on the pavement turned into a battlefield. And then there were the bonfires. Oh, the magic of fire when you're a kid. Someone would sneak matches from home, another would gather sticks, and soon enough we'd all be huddled around the crackling flames like tiny adventurers guarding a secret. We'd roast potatoes, sometimes even bread, watching the sparks shoot into the dark sky. The fire wasn't just warmth, it was a magnet for stories. Scary stories about haunted houses, ghosts that followed you home, or strange noises in the forest. Stories so terrifying that when it was time to walk home alone, you ran the entire way, glancing over your shoulder. And yet, we loved it. That mix of fear and laughter tied us together in a way no group chat ever could. Sometimes, when the fire burned low and the night was quiet, we didn't even need games or stories. We'd just lie on the grass, staring at the stars, talking about who we wanted to be, what we dreamed of, who we had a crush on. Those conversations, whispered under the open sky, with no adults listening, they felt like secrets written in the universe. The best part? Nobody cared about time. Hours passed without us noticing. There was no scrolling to check, no screen to unlock. The only clock was the fading fire, the chill of night air, and the sound of a mother's voice calling from a window. Come home already. That voice was both an ending and a promise. Tomorrow, we'd do it all over again. And let's not forget the little wars. Not online battles, but real ones. Water fights that left us soaked, snowball fights that ended with red noses and frozen fingers, stick swords clashing until someone yelled, "You're cheating." It was messy. It was loud. It was real. Do you know what's strange? Back then, none of us thought our lives were special. We didn't call it nostalgia. We didn't even think of it as the good old days. It was just life. But now, looking back, I realize those moments were priceless. The laughter, the scraped knees, the smoky smell of a bonfire clinging to our clothes. That was our childhood. A childhood that today feels almost mythical, like something out of a storybook. And here's the truth. We weren't richer. We didn't have more than kids today. In fact, we had less. Less toys, less technology, less access to the world. But somehow, with less, we lived more. So let me ask you, when was the last time you felt that kind of joy? Not the quick, empty rush of a like or a notification, but pure joy. The kind that comes from running until you're out of breath. From laughing so hard your sides hurt. From being so lost in the moment that you forget the rest of the world exists. Maybe that's what childhood without smartphones gave us, the ability to be present. To live not through a screen, but through each other. And sometimes when I see kids sitting silently with their faces glued to phones, I wish I could shake them and say, put it down. Go outside. Find your people. Make memories that don't need Wi-Fi to stay alive. Because here's the truth. The internet can crash, batteries can die, apps can disappear, but the memories of childhood, of street games, of bonfires and whispered secrets under stars, they stay with you forever. That was our childhood. That was life before smartphones. And maybe that's what made it unforgettable. Do you know what's strange? Families today can live under the same roof, eat at the same table, even sit in the same room, and yet be worlds apart. Each person with their phone, scrolling, watching, texting, together, but separate, silent. But there was a time, not so long ago, when family evenings felt different. When the living room wasn't filled with the buzz of notifications, but with voices, with laughter, with the smell of food drifting from the kitchen, with stories passed from one generation to the next. Picture this. The day's work is done. No one rushes to switch on the TV. No one disappears into their room. Instead, the family gathers, maybe around a wooden table, maybe by the fireplace, maybe just in the living room, where the lights are soft and the mood is warm. The first thing you notice? Presents. Everyone is really there. The evening usually started with food. A simple meal, bread still warm from the oven, soup that smelled like comfort itself, maybe potatoes baked until golden. People didn't just eat in silence. Meals were conversations. Every bite came with a story, what happened at work today, what the neighbor said, which cow escaped the yard this time. Small things, funny things, but somehow they carried weight because they were shared. And then, when plates were cleared and the table wiped down, the real magic began. The stories. Grandparents always had the best ones. They'd lean back in their chairs, eyes half closed, and start with, "Back in my day," and suddenly, the room transformed. You weren't in your house anymore. You were in the past, walking barefoot to school, fighting through snowstorms, hiding during hard times, dancing at weddings, falling in love under the stars. The way they told it, you could see it, smell it, feel it. The room became a time machine, and every word felt like a gift. Sometimes the stories turned into lessons. A tale about hard work, about mistakes made and the price paid, about loyalty or betrayal, or the kind of courage you don't read in books. These weren't lectures. They weren't scoldings. They were wisdom wrapped in memory. And as kids, we sat there wide-eyed, drinking it all in, not realizing that one day these stories would become treasures we'd carry forever. But not all evenings were serious. Some turned into music. Someone would pull out a guitar or sit at the piano, and suddenly the whole family was singing. Old folk songs, love songs, lullabies, voices blending in ways that made the walls themselves seem to hum along. Sometimes we clapped, sometimes we danced, sometimes we laughed because someone sang completely out of tune. But it didn't matter. It wasn't about perfection. It was about togetherness. And then there were the games. Not the kind you download, but games that lived in people's hands. Card games, riddles, even tongue twisters that made everyone stumble and laugh. Children begged for just one more round. Parents pretended to be strict, but always gave in. And the warmth didn't stop there. On winter nights, families gathered by the fireplace. The fire cracked, sparks floated up, and shadows danced across the walls. People sat close, wrapped in blankets, sipping tea or milk. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of comfort, of safety, of belonging. Do you know what I miss the most? The way time didn't matter. No one kept checking a screen. No one rushed the evening to binge another show or scroll endlessly. Family evenings lasted as long as they needed to. Sometimes until yawns grew too big to hide. Sometimes until someone fell asleep in their chair. And maybe that's the difference. Back then, evenings weren't about filling the time. They were about sharing it. About turning ordinary hours into something extraordinary simply by being together. Today, we say we don't have time, that we're too busy. But maybe the truth is we've just forgotten how to spend it. Because I promise you this, no movie, no video, no viral trend will ever compare to the sound of your grandmother's voice telling a story that only she knows. Or the sight of your father laughing so hard he wipes tears from his eyes. Or the warmth of your mother humming a song while you all join in, off-key and happy. That was life before screens. And it was more real than anything a screen could ever show. So let me ask you, when was the last time your family truly sat together? No phones, no TV, no distractions? Can you even remember? If not, Maybe it's time. Maybe tonight, instead of disappearing into your devices, you sit down. You share a story. You sing. You play a game. You laugh. You remember what it feels like to be present. Because one day, when all the devices are gone, the Wi-Fi is off, and the world is quiet, the only thing left will be the memories you made. And the best ones, the ones that last forever, are never made on a screen. That was family life before the internet. And maybe, just maybe, that's the kind of life worth bringing back. Have you ever noticed how today, even when people are together, they're not really together? At weddings, birthdays, even holidays, half the room is staring at phones, filming instead of living, posting instead of feeling. And yet, there was a time when celebration didn't need a camera, a playlist, or a viral trend. A time when the joy of an entire community could light up the night better than any screen ever could. I'm talking about fairs, dances, neighborly gatherings, the kind of events that made villages and towns come alive long before the internet existed. It started small. A birthday, a wedding, the harvest being finished. Any excuse was enough. Word spread not through posts or group chats, but through voices, shouted across yards, whispered at the market, carried on the wind. By evening, everyone knew, and everyone came. Imagine this. The town square filling with people as the sun went down. Lanterns swinging from trees, benches pulled out into the open. The air smelled of roasted meat, bread, and sometimes even sweet pies cooling on windowsills. Music floated through the air, not from speakers, but from fiddles, accordions, tambourines. The kind of music that makes your feet tap, whether you want them to or not. And then, the dancing began. Not choreographed, not rehearsed, not filmed for likes. Just pure, unfiltered joy. People spinning, clapping, stomping their feet in rhythm with the band. Old men trying to keep up, children squealing with laughter, young couples stealing glances in the firelight. Sometimes the dances lasted so long that shoes wore out, but nobody cared. Because it wasn't about looking good, it was about feeling alive. And celebrations weren't just about dancing. They were about connection. Neighbors who argued during the day found themselves laughing side by side at night. Strangers became friends after sharing a drink. Families who rarely spoke sat together, passing plates, breaking bread, clinking glasses. And here's the beautiful thing. Nobody stood in the corner, isolated. Nobody was invisible. If you showed up, you belonged. You were part of something bigger than yourself. I remember the fairs most vividly. Rows of stalls where people sold homemade crafts, embroidered shirts, honey in glass jars that gleamed like gold. Children ran wild, clutching sweet candies wrapped in paper. Young men tried to win prizes by tossing rings or climbing tall poles, while the crowd cheered them on. And in every corner, laughter, that contagious, unstoppable laughter that rises when people are free, unhurried, together. Sometimes the gatherings were quieter. A neighbor's house filling with guests for an evening of food and talk. The table overflowing with dishes, pickles, bread, roasted chicken, fruit from the garden. People crammed shoulder to shoulder, talking over one another, arguing, joking, singing. If someone pulled out a guitar, the entire room joined in. If someone told a story, even the noisiest children hushed to listen. And it wasn't just about joy. Communities came together in sorrow, too. When someone lost a loved one, neighbors didn't just send a message or a sad emoji. They showed up, with food, with words, with silence. They sat beside the grieving, held their hands, shared the weight of their pain. That was community, not virtual but flesh and blood, presence and warmth. The most powerful thing about those gatherings was the feeling of being needed. If there was a wedding, you helped set the tables. If there was a harvest, you joined the fields. If there was a dance, you clapped, sang, or simply stood there adding to the joy. Everyone had a role. Everyone mattered. Compare that to today, where half the time we don't even know our neighbors' names. Where celebration is measured not in laughter, but in how many photos were posted online. Don't you feel something missing? Because here's the truth. The glow of a phone screen will never match the glow of firelight reflecting in people's eyes as they dance. A comment on a post will never compare to a neighbor handing you food with their own hands. and alike will never equal the sound of 100 voices singing the same song, off-key but together. I sometimes wonder if people today would even understand what those nights felt like. The way music seemed to shake the ground beneath your feet. The way your chest ached from laughing so hard. The way you walked home with sore legs and a full heart. The night air cool against your skin. The sounds of the celebration still echoing in your ears. Those are more than gatherings. They were proof that life wasn't meant to be lived alone. That joy multiplies when it's shared. That sorrow lightens when it's carried by many. And maybe that's the lesson we've forgotten in our age of screens. Community isn't something you follow. It's something you create. With hands, with voices, with presence. So let me ask you, when was the last time you truly celebrated with people? Not online, not in photos, but with your own body, your own laughter, your own voice? Can you remember? Because those old gatherings, the fairs, the dances, the neighborly feasts, they remind us of something simple and timeless. That happiness is real, not when it's posted, but when it's shared. That was life before the internet, and it was unforgettable. Here's a question that might surprise you. When was the last time you were truly alone, without music in your ears, without a screen in your hands, without the noise of the world pressing in? Not lonely, just alone, quiet, present with yourself. For most of us today, that silence feels unbearable. We reach for our phones the moment the room goes still. We scroll, we tap, we distract. But there was a time, not so long ago, when solitude wasn't something to escape. It was something to cherish. I remember evenings when the house fell silent after dinner. No buzzing, no constant updates. Just a steady rhythm of life slowing down. And in that silence, people found beauty. Some reached for books. Heavy, dog-eared novels with pages that smelled faintly of time itself. You didn't skim, you didn't speed read. You sank into them, letting the world outside fade away. A single candle or lamp flickering beside you. Shadows dancing across the walls as your imagination carried you somewhere else entirely. And when you finally closed the book, the story stayed with you, lingering in your dreams, shaping the way you saw the world. Others reached for paper and pen. Letters, yes, real letters, written slowly, carefully, with thoughts that had weight because they took time to shape. You didn't fire off a quick message filled with emojis. You poured yourself onto the page, line by line. Every word mattered, because once the ink dried, it couldn't be taken back. And then came the waiting, days, sometimes weeks, before a reply found its way back to you. That waiting wasn't frustration. It was anticipation, hope, longing. And when the letter finally arrived, you held it like treasure, because it was. And then there were the walks. Long, unhurried walks through streets that grew quieter as night fell. No music in your ears, no podcasts, no notifications. Just the sound of your own footsteps, the cool air against your skin, the whisper of trees, the distant bark of a dog. And in that stillness, something incredible happened. You thought, really thought, about who you were, about what you wanted, about where life might take you. Those walks were conversations with yourself, the kind we've almost forgotten how to have. Some people found solitude in small rituals. Knitting by lamplight, carving wood, watering plants, watching the sky change colors as the day slipped into night. There is no rush, no need to be productive, no pressure to share the moment with the world. The moment was enough simply because it existed. And maybe that's the greatest loss of the internet age. Not our ability to connect, but our ability to disconnect. To step away from the noise and rediscover what silence has to offer. Because in that silence, creativity is born. Ideas come to life. Hearts heal. And you realize that solitude isn't empty. It's full. Full of yourself, your thoughts, your dreams, your deepest truths. I think back to those nights often. My grandmother humming softly while mending clothes. My grandfather writing notes in a small notebook, his pen scratching quietly. Me, lying on the floor with a book bigger than my head, lost in worlds I could barely imagine. The air smelled of tea cooling on the table. The windows cracked open to let the night breeze in. Outside, the stars glittered like secrets. Inside, everything was calm. Tell me honestly, doesn't part of you long for that? Not just the nostalgia, but the peace? A peace you can't buy, can't download, can't fake. A peace that comes only when you set everything down and let yourself be. Because here's the truth. Silence isn't the enemy. Solitude isn't a punishment. They're gifts. Gifts we once understood. Gifts we've nearly forgotten. So maybe tonight, just once you try it. Turn everything off. Leave the phone in another room. Pick up a book. Write a letter you'll never send. Step outside and let the night wrap around you. Don't run from the quiet. Listen to it. Feel it. Remember it. Because long before the internet, before the screens, before the endless scroll, people live whole lives in that quiet. They found joy in it. They found themselves in it. And maybe, if we're brave enough to return to it, so can we. That was life before the internet. Not louder, not faster, but deeper. And sometimes, the quietest evenings are the ones that echo forever.